Hey, Nat. Thank you. Thanks for taking the time to join us and share your story, the AccuKnox story with the listeners of the podcast. Appreciate you taking the time.
You're most welcome, Raj.
Yeah. Before we start the story, just a quick, I remembered when I said thanking you for taking your time. I was hearing the co-founder of Coinbase, Brian Armstrong, he was talking about quoting someone saying that, an entrepreneur's story is moving from one setback to another. So, I definitely, again, reiterating appreciation for your time to to talk with us and share your story. Okay, cool. Thank you. So let's get started. The first part of it in terms of our discussion is around the origin story, how the AccuKnox story started. So maybe if you can, give us a little bit overview of that. And before that, just a brief introduction about yourself and your background so that the listeners have context to the rest of the story.
Absolutely, Raj. A delight to speak to you, and want to say hello to all your listeners and wish them a very, 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 very happy New Year. And so my background is I'm a sort of a techie at heart. I got my undergraduate in engineering back in IIT Bombay, came here to US for the master's degree. And like the typical kind of standard story, one thing leads to the other. After master's, you take up a job, and then before you know it, you're sort of getting involved in a number of increasing levels of responsibility. And I moved from engineering to product management very early in my career because I really enjoyed the confluence of business and technology. And I built products, but I was equally anxious to see how is it being used, right? And what this is way back when. Today you can get very good user stories, user journey, the automated tools available for you to see how the user is using it. But in the good old days, you just have to go talk to the customers and say, what do you like, what do you not like? Typically, us engineers, we always love to over-engineer products. Right? We build 180 products, and then we find the customers are using only 15, right? And then, how do you, focus on those 15? And you just have to go out, talk to clients in those good old days, right? So that's what got me on the business side of things. And since then, I moved to California in 1990, worked for large companies for about 10 years till 92. After that, California, you get the entrepreneurial bug, right? Once you get that bug, just get it hard to get it out of your system, right? And then, as I often like to say, no big company will hire me, and even if they hire me, within 3 months they'll fire me. So I've been a part of typical startups, and it's been a very, very enjoyable journey. It certainly keeps you on your toes. It keeps you, I'd say, young because you constantly have to learn, relearn, unlearn almost everything you know and relearn everything all over again. You work with some amazing people, very interesting people, and the whole journey of you going towards kind of unknown unknowns, right? To me, if it's a known problem, known solution, big companies will do it. We have no business doing it, right? We're going to get clobbered, Pick any industry, pick an SAP or Oracle or Microsoft or in the cybersecurity we are in, a Palo Alto or McAfee or Symantec will do it and will kill us, right? So you really have to go after problems which they're not even thinking about, or they're thinking about, but you really have a really good angle to it, and you kind of can outthink, out execute, and really outperform them, right? So, and that keeps you very, very keeps you on your toes. It's a very exciting journey. It's a challenging one. It's not for the faint of heart because it puts a lot of toll on you personally, physically, emotionally, your family, and all that. But that's what each one of us have to kind of say, pick our poison, and this is what this is the one I picked. It's been enjoyable. It's been a fun ride, and I can't thank my colleagues, my friends, my supporters, investors enough for giving me this unique opportunity.
Sure, sure. Thank you. Thanks, Nat, for the intro. Definitely an interesting journey in terms of starting in tech and then sort of working your way through to your current role as founder and CEO of AccuKnox. So yeah, I guess the next part of our discussion is a little bit around the origin story of AccuKnox, right? How that seed started in your head and into where it is today. I know it's a journey. You're still in the process of building it, but if you can share a little bit about the origin story, that would be helpful for the
Absolutely.
listeners.
Absolutely. Okay. So in the last about, I've done 2 startups in the area of cybersecurity. Again, this is even before it was called cybersecurity, right? We just call it enterprise security or security, right? And the problem about security has not really changed. It's a very tough and a very gripping problem, right? The fundamental problem is of asymmetry, right? Asymmetry is the same problem as the terrorist problem, right? Because we have to be right all the time as defenders, and they have to be right only once, right? So
Yeah.
there's no penalty for retrying, right? In the sense that they oftentimes they come from jurisdictions where the same laws which apply to you and me don't apply,
Mhm.
and there's no penalty for retrying, right? So and uh, as they often say, it's far easier to break things than build things, right?
Mhm.
As builders, we think kind of logically, rationally. Uh, Again, our education teaches us to think a certain way, whereas the attacker thinks in a very, very non-linear way. They think about how to break it, and it's a very different way of thinking. And oftentimes they succeed. Again, as I said, we have to be right 100 out of 100, right? They have to be right only 1 out of 100. So it's a very, very tough asymmetric battle, right? So that's been the problem of security all over, right? And about 18 months ago, my very close friend, business partner, co-founder, Asif Ali. I've known him for 15 years. He and I did a startup 15 years ago in the area of mobile advertising. He's a fantastic world-class techie. And we built one very successful company. And after that, we've stayed in touch. We've oftentimes compared notes. And he's really, really great, world-class cloud architect, microservices, Kubernetes architect, and the like. And he'd done work for a number of large companies in the area of transforming their IT assets from on-prem to the cloud, right? And that's a whole journey, right? All the way from you just lift and shift. You take the same workload on-prem, put it on the cloud. That's the easy part, but you really don't get any benefits out of that, right? But then in order to get true benefit, you got to refactor it. You got to do microservices. Within that, you got to multiple levels of automation and re-architecting and re-platforming, right? And he'd done very, very well. And a number of CIOs, CISOs he'd done work for said, hey, Asif, you've done a great job of re-platforming, re-architecting it. And now we really have a world-class cloud solution. And you've dealt with the problems of manageability, observability, how about security? Right? So that's when Asif came to me and we started ideating, right? So the problem of cloud security is a very, very unique and challenging one in the sense that the cloud vendors do a great job. They essentially give you a fantastic platform for you to bring your assets and really let you achieve a business objective with very, very little kind of overhead and make your fixed cost a variable cost, right? So from a cloud economics, the very, very compelling value proposition. But when it comes to security, it's a very, very clear that they say it's a shared security model. It's no different than an apartment complex, right? When you go to an apartment complex, the apartment complex says, hey, I'll take care of the gate. I'll take care of the up to the building entrance. But after that, it's your responsibility. If anything
Yep.
happens in your apartment, that's your problem, right? So in some sense, it's only fair, right? So they don't know what assets in your apartment are most valuable, what is less valuable, and things of that nature. So in that situation, so the security aspects becomes quite challenging, and even more so because in a Kubernetes container environment, right? So one of the reasons people move to cloud is obviously I want to save, take a fixed cost and make it a variable cost. I don't want to deal with dealing with the platform and just the basic infrastructure. That's great, right? Google about 10, 15 years ago, it started a project called Project Borg, right? And that was Google's microservices Kubernetes project. It later got renamed into Kubernetes. And essentially that, the simplest way to describe it is take a large monolith application, take an SAP or Oracle, right? And rather than have the whole application be available, just split it into a bunch of microservices and just bring up the microservice whenever you want, run it, and then deplete it or delete it or deprecate it, right? So if you want to calculate the tax amount for a piece of goods going from X to Y, just bring up the tax microservice, calculate it, and then after bring it down, right? If you want to know the optimal shipping route to go from Chicago to Kansas City for a package, bring the optimal route application, bring it up and bring it down, right? So essentially, unlike the good old days when all this would be in one large SAP application. So you really done a great job of chopping the application into only what is necessary at that particular instance and bring it down, which is fantastic. The reason Google is able to get unbelievable compute efficiencies, probably 10, 20, 30 times more than anybody, 100 times more than anybody else, because they've done a great job of re-architecting it in this microservice Kubernetes architecture, right? And the same thing is what companies are adopting. For example, Uber is nothing but a bunch of 3,000 microservices, right? Which sort of talk to each other in the cloud. And same thing in the case of Netflix, and these are published numbers, right? Netflix brings up 175,000 microservices up, containers up and down a day, right? So what is really happening is that this whole thing has become massively ephemeral, transient, and very short-lived, and the scale volume is just massive, right? So in this kind of microservice environment, security is a huge challenge, right? Because one single microservice which gets affected, right? It can have a cascading effect on the whole security of the system, right? Unlike good old days when we built our early systems, we used simple thing IP tables. IP table says, this IP address is good, this IP address is not good, exclude it, include it, and classic micro-segmentation. You take a data center infrastructure, split into segments. It's finance, it's IT. IT cannot talk to finance. IT can talk to customer support. So customer support cannot talk to HR. You really came up. These are reasonably good, functional, simple ways to solve the problem. And whereas in the cloud, it's enormously challenging effort, right? So when Asif came to me and we started ideating it, right? And so that's when we said we'd love to run it past people who are way smarter than us, right? So that's when very almost by coincidence, I volunteered for an organization called ATAA in the Bay Area, American Tamil Entrepreneurs Association, and there I ran into Raghu Madabushi. Raghu is an amazing venture professional. He's got an amazing reputation in Silicon Valley. He was a corporate venture professional at GE, and then he was at SRI, Stanford Research Institute, right? And so he and I started talking, and he said, it would be wonderful. I'd love to have you talk to Phil Porras. Phil Porras is sort of like a legend in the computer security industry. He's the kind of brains behind a number of inventions in computer security in the area of intrusion detection. He detected a worm called, I forget the name of the worm, but a very amazing worm which attacked 25 million PCs, right? And so just a great intellectual horsepower, right? And so we started talking, and so that's when he'd approached the same problem from a different direction, right? So SRI, what they do is they really build some core technologies and then they license it to companies, right? That's what they typically do. Every once in a while, when they meet like-minded entrepreneurs, they kind of co-create companies with them, right? So ours was one where we were solving the same problem of cloud security, and the broader problem is zero trust. Zero trust became very topical after the SolarWinds attack in the US, right? SolarWinds was a very vicious attack, one where they attacked the supply chain. Supply chain meaning the very fabric of every piece of software, which when I say every, maybe 10,000 companies used. The attackers, it's been vastly believed that these are Russian attackers. Russian attackers essentially changed the update patches of SolarWinds and injected some malicious code to the point that every 10,000 of their SolarWinds implementations were affected. They in turn were able to masquerade as real or good, and were able to sort of take very critical information. You're talking about amazing US Defense Department, massive government, state company, local governments, right? And take data and exfiltrate it, right? So this is a very vicious attack. And the example I use is almost like US. US was a reasonably docile country, really not involved in world affairs, in the geopolitical issues at all, till the Pearl Harbor thing happened, right? When Japan attacked Hawaii, the naval base. That's when that was a wake-up call for US, and it really entered the world stage in the World War II and the like, right? So very similar to that, the post-SolarWinds attack, the US position on cybersecurity changed quite a bit, right? And since then, they made zero trust a mandate. Every government started adopting it. Now countries, companies are adopting it globally, right? And zero trust is quite simple, says, don't trust anybody. Assume that you're going to be you're already been infected or you will be infected by a malicious cyber threat actor. And everything you do should be predicated on the premise that you've already been attacked, right? So, or will be attacked. If you're going to be attacked, you might as well act like you're already attacked, right? Which means that you trust nobody, right? Which means you don't trust any user or any system access. You go for extremely positive validation before you trust somebody. You go through multiple levels of validation. And even after you trust, only then you give them access. And after that, you continuously sort of track them or monitor them, right? The simplest way to describe zero trust versus regular security in the pre-SolarWinds world is like you and me going to the mall. If you go to the mall, yeah, you're generally welcome. But if somebody were to pull up a gun or a knife, the mall police will come down on us, right? So that's your typical security in most companies. Pretty much, we live in a very sort of open, cooperative, supportive world. So generally broad access from SaaS applications to bring your own device to mobile. It's very common in companies, right? So, and only when something suspicious happens, they're gonna stop you or block you, right? That's the case of regular security. Zero trust is almost like going to the airport, right? When you go to the airport, by definition, you are denied access, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the moment you go, people say, why are you here? Show me your passport. Show me a driver's license. Let me put it, even that's not enough. Let me put it through a laser scan, right? And even that is not enough. They say, okay, do you have a flight ticket within 4 to 6 hours of when you show up? right?
Yep. Mhm.
And even that's not enough. Even based on that, they say, okay, you can go only to the domestic section or only to the international section, right?
Yep.
And even beyond that, there's motion sensors and CCTV monitors which monitor what you do, right? So that really is zero trust. Zero trust is no, deny all.
Mhm.
And based on extreme diligence and validation verification, give access and then continuously monitor, right? So back to the cloud security problem, right? How do you implement this in a cloud security fabric where you got hundreds and thousands of containers being brought up and down, every second or every minute, right? So in this, the challenges of zero trust have become very difficult, right? Because unlike IP tables where you say this allowed, this not allowed, that's fine. That's an easy thing to manage. This thing is where you're coming up with explicit whitelist policies saying that A container can talk to B container, B cannot talk to C, a PCI validated container can talk to only other PCI validated container, a GDPR application cannot write data to disk in an unencrypted way, right?
Yep.
Or CCPA cannot exfiltrate data, right? So you cannot come up with 100,000 rules, right? The combinatorics, if you've got 100 containers, the 100 square rules become impossible for people to generate, right? So it becomes an untenable problem from a pure practical implementation. So oftentimes we like to say that we put the easy button on zero trust, right? So what we've really done is in partnership with some of the core technologies which came from SRI. So long story short, so once Asif and I and Phil talked, we really came to real good convergence on how we want to approach the problems. And the thing about cybersecurity is that the easy problems are very easy. The hard problems are extremely hard, right? Because again, we're talking about a very sophisticated adversary, right? And so we said we wanted some deep intellectual property, and we really liked the SRI team, Phil and his team. So we kind of co-created. AccuKnox is really part of co-creation. And moment SRI and we partnered, one where SRI has invested in us. They've assigned intellectual property. We have an ongoing R&D partnership with Phil and his team. And Phil also agreed to join us as a co-founder and chief scientist, right? So that is fantastic. Quite candidly, even if we could pay $1 million, we couldn't hire somebody as sharp as Phil. And not only that, having access to an entire R&D team under Phil at SRI. So he came on board, and almost SRI's name is such a gold in the Silicon Valley that the moment SRI invested, a bunch of Silicon Valley VCs reached out to us. And around the same time, Raghu moved to National Grid, and he expressed an interest in working with us. At the end of the day, startups are all about the people you trust, you respect, you have mutual credibility with each other. And in this tough journey, right? There are lots of people who are what I call fair weather friends. When the weather is fantastic, they'll be with you. Life is a better place. You're smoking, joking, drinking, having fun, right? But that's not the entrepreneurial journey. Entrepreneurial journey is a bunch of obstacles, challenges, pivots, and along the way. So you really want somebody absolutely the rainy weather friend, right? The sunny weather friends and the rainy weather friends. And Raghu is just absolutely fantastic. He's got a great reputation. We got along very well. And so we elected to go with National Grid. It's been a fantastic journey. So really, since the time we started about 14 months ago is when the company got incubated and started. Then we went about, we always knew that we wanted to have a good sized team in India for more than one reason, right? Because these are tough technology challenges, and to hire absolutely world-class technical people in Silicon Valley is just impossible, right? We are competing with the Google, the Facebook, the Apple, or the Ubers of the world. And there's no way, you cannot solve these problems by hiring B minus techies, right?
Yep.
And A plus techies we couldn't afford. And quite candidly, even if we could afford and made the offers, right? Quite candidly, why would at this stage, right? Why would somebody choose us over Uber, right? They might not, right? So we wanted to have the same level of caliber of techies. And so we elected to build a team in India. And we're very, very pleased that Rahul Jadhav joined us as a co-founder. Rahul is again an absolutely world-class architect, 10 plus years at Huawei. By the time that I spoke to him, he's spending many months in Huawei, China. He was finishing up a number of projects, and he was quarantined in China, and then was lucky enough to make it back to India, and then he joined us. He's built a great team back in India. So think about Phil as the overall kind of thought leader, visionary kind of the solution. And Asif and Rahul are absolutely world-class implementers, right? So every company needs a R&D. So think about Phil as an R, and Rahul, Asif, and team as a D. We've got a great team of people in India. We also have a couple of Phil for us as collaborators from Korea. Jae-hoon Nam joined us. So we got an absolutely world-class team of world-class cloud architects, microservice architects, cybersecurity architects, and people who can really build products. And then the end of enterprise products have to be consumed. The packaging, the usability, the form, fit, functions, integration, the knobs and the dials and the controls, right? How do you make products so easy to consume, right? So that's what we are focused at. It's been a fantastic journey, and we've done lots of things right. One thing which has happened, which I'm sure you know, Raj, is that the way software gets consumed in the industry has changed, right? Unlike the good old days, I assume you've got the same level of experience as I do. The good old days, it was all top-down decisions, right? You and I called on the CIO, CISO, and we presented a solution. The CISO liked it. CISO said, hey, John, go implement it, right? Today, technologies have become so complex and so sophisticated, right? Oftentimes, the CIO, CISO plays a more a coach and a guide, right? As opposed to sort of the decision maker, right? And the decisions are really have gone to the hands-on people at the implementation level in the organization, right? These are people who are hands-on architects, engineers, people who consume open source, people who contribute to open source. And that's become a significant part of the technology adoption cycle. If you look at Linux, if you look at in the cybersecurity Splunk, or if you look at the cybersecurity industry Snake or HashiCorp or JFrog, right? Or Elastic. These are all absolutely world-class billion-dollar companies. And the adoption came in more bottoms up as opposed to top down, right?
Yep.
Or MySQL is another great example, right? So these are all companies which had sort of huge bottoms up adoption. And in keeping with that, we really have an open source model, one where we make it available and let people kind of try it out. And if they like it, obviously that's the whole full enterprise support, consulting, implement, all that is available. But the barrier to adoption, we've really eliminated it. So,
okay. Cool.
So long story short, we've come a long way. We got adopted by CNCF. CNCF stands for Cloud Native Compute Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Is really the high watermark. It'll be equivalent of getting into an Ivy League school, for example, right? So they adopted our open source Kubernetes runtime security product called KubeArmor. So we're very pleased that somebody as distinguished as that adopted us. And so we've got a good team. We've been capital efficient. We did a small seed round of $4.6 million. We've come a long way. We've got some amazing customers who are helping us with product market fit. Again, back to what I mentioned, there are 50 features we could build, right? and there are only 20 features we should be building. And
Yeah.
within that, we got time and money only for 15 or 12, right? So how
Yeah.
do you come up with that, with that? So our customers have been helping us a lot. And we're all about very, very active engagement with customers. And so we're working with about a dozen customers to solicit the feedback. And we quickly internalize that, add it to our monthly sprint, and roll out releases.
Got it. Got it.
And all 15 patents. So we've got very strong intellectual property moat.
Sure, sure. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, I think from a flow standpoint, definitely, you covered the people aspect of it, right? How you found the people to build your idea and take it to the next phase of it. And that's something that I was intending to ask you about. And thanks for talking about it. In terms of the other two stages of the process, if you may, the customer discovery process, more around your hypotheses of the customer's problems and your products match to those problems. I think you talked about that as well as part of the customer discovery process, and how you're testing and qualifying your hypotheses, right? That's more important as well. It's not just you're coming up with your hypotheses, but how are you testing and qualifying it? And in terms of the channel, I guess you are taking like an open source model in terms of taking your product out, right? Okay.
Correct.
Cool.
But even the customer hypothesis, right? It in the last 12 months, we've evolved it quite a bit, right? So our initial approach was top-down CISO led, but very quickly we found that the adoption really was the bottoms up adoption. That's about 6 months ago, we made a major pivot, and hence the open source. And very quickly we were able to completely retool the organization into focusing towards the open source, DevSecOps, shift left, bottoms up adoption, right? So
great.
that's been a fantastic sort of, again, as a young company, we had to be agile, right? Because large companies like Cisco or IBM can take their own time, but we have to be quickly agile to pick up market signals and adapt our implementation and execution towards that.
Sure. No, definitely. Thanks, Nat, for sharing that aspect of how you pivoted, from your previous model to more of a bottoms up DevSecOps open source model. So yeah, that's good to know. I guess in terms of this aspect of the feedback cycle, right? When you said you pivoted, that just follow up to understand, how that happened. In going back to this model of customer development and product development, they happen in parallel, right? You get out and talk to locate your first customers and validate your assumptions. That's on the customer development side, while you're building and developing the product, right? On the product side. So just curious in terms of people and decision making and stuff like that, right? In this case, maybe taking the example of how did you realize that there is a need to pivot to this different model, and how you went about that? Just sharing any insights will be helpful for other founders and builders in their journey.
Sure. I mean, there are two schools of thought, right? Raj, you know it as well as I do, right? Because one school of thought says is that build only what the customer wants, right? And that has been used in non-tech industries. And all of us in tech, we tend to get too self-absorbed in tech, right? But the non-tech industry, Procter & Gamble, for example, right, did focus groups, right? They'd say, hey, here's a shampoo, bring 15 people, and try different shampoo, the color, the texture, the packaging, the usage, the branding, the name, the color, the whole shebang, right? And they did a bunch of focus groups. And so really customer-driven development has been done in the non-tech industry for donkey's years, right? And these are very well-refined, extremely superbly managed process, right? And the company which brought that to the tech industry, to the best of my knowledge, was Intuit. Intuit, when they built QuickBooks, right? They probably did the best job of talking to every CPA, bookkeeper, what reports do you need? Do you want the icon on the top left or bottom left, or do you want it blue or pink or red? So they did extremely good customer interviews and customer-driven development, right? And I had the enormous fortune of working for Siebel Systems in the way back when. And Tom Siebel really believed in that, really, attach yourself to the customer and really don't try to read their mind, just ask them what they want, how they want it, and the like, and use that as a basis for you to build products, right? So I sort of come from that world, right? But later on in Silicon Valley, there are equally good examples of companies such as, say, Apple, right? Who said, hey, don't even bother asking the customer because they don't know what they want, or they might know it, but they may not be able to articulate it, right? And I think Steve Jobs said if Henry Ford had asked people what kind of vehicles they wanted, they would have said, I want a faster buggy, horse carriage, right?
Yep.
Right. And so I would have stuck in some old paradigm. And the reason I didn't ask those people is the reason I was able to build Model T, right? And the number of people that are equally good sort of views and opinions on how not to ask for the customer, but really use sort of abstract or in a gestalt way, understand what the customer might need, right? Yep. Not what they want, but what they need. That's always the gap between what they want and what they need. And as a product manager, that really is your job. Your job is not to go ask customer, do you want 12 reports or 14 reports? Your job is really to understand what the customer is doing, what the user journey is, and really abstract that and build a product out of it. And we clearly, that's one. I wish I was Steve Jobs, which I'm not. Right? So between that and really asking the customer, so we sort of took a little bit kind of hybrid approach, which means that we came up with sort of a canonical sort of a prototype and said, this is what we plan to build. Tell us what you like, what you don't like, and kind of quickly get sort of have them react to something as opposed to give them some open-ended approaches, right? Or saying, these are 14 things we plan to build. What are the top 7 things we have to build, right? We
sure.
build. So ask those kind of questions. And again, not just from one customer, but multiple customers so that we have a viewpoint of the market and not an individual customer. So that's the approach we took. And so that has been extremely very interesting process, a very engaging process, and a very sort of also a humbling process, right? You think you got to build this, the customer says, hey, that's not worth anything at all. That's really what I want. So it's been a fantastic journey, right? So
sure. Thank you. Thanks for talking through your blended approach of both listening and proposing something, getting feedback, and sort of testing and qualifying your problem and product hypotheses. So the last part of the flow, obviously it's it's a journey, continuing journey, but from customer discovery, the next phase is around customer validation, right? Building your sales roadmap, understanding the organization and influence maps. I think that you talked about how it's these days it's a lot more developer driven adoption, right? Your customer access map and sales strategy and so forth. And I think one part of why you were approached by Raghu earlier to sort of take this idea to the next phase is your ability to bring together a set of key partners that can bring this technology to the market, right? So if you can talk a little bit about your sort of approach to that from a customer validation standpoint, that would be helpful to sort of understand the flow.
Absolutely. So one of the biggest challenges which enterprises face, not just us, small, medium, and large, is the cost of customer acquisition has increased immensely, right? And that's because it's fairly easy for 2, 3 of us to go build a product, right? And it's not just us, the thousands of us, of people like that, tons of companies out there, and all of them are vying for the same customers' mind share, right? So every CIO, CISO is getting called by 1,000 vendors, right? If you think it's hard for us vendors to sell, just imagine the problem that the CISOs have. They're getting called with 1,000 vendors, right? And not just any vendor, but also the IBM, the Oracle, the Cisco's, you name it, right? Can you imagine their problem about how do I kind of distill and kind of make sense out of this? But everybody's trying to solve the same problem or some variant of the same problem, right?
Yep.
So getting customer mindshare becomes very important, and that's the reason that the bottoms up is a very high integrity process, right? Because it is the user, the developer is really embracing the product. So that is an important one. But developing bottoms up adoption takes time. If you look at it takes 4 years, 5 years to get a critical mass. And if you look at any community, whether it's Linux Foundation or Cassandra or MySQL, right? It takes a long time to create a groundswell of critical mass, right? So obviously, as a startup, we cannot wait that long. So we need some, wins. So we do have sort of also a top-down sort of motion where we go, top-down, CISO down, and try to get quickly to demonstrate value and customer adoption. That's an expensive process, right? So the bottoms up is really highly scalable, very cost-efficient process, but that takes time. But the top down is more expensive, more inefficient, a little bit more high touch, and but you can see results a little bit faster. But we know it's not scalable. But so we're doing that in parallel. The third vector is how do we leverage partners, right? So there's a whole partner ecosystem, right? So what we've done is really for every dollar of our software, there are $8 being spent by the customer, right? In different adjacent segments, right? And how do we attach ourselves to this whole value map, if you will, right? And how do we make sure that we stitch ourselves into a fabric, right? Where you really the cost of customer entry becomes lower for us. And for customers also, the cost of adopting a solution becomes a lot lower, right? Because for them to do 8 different POCs with 8 different vendors or demos, it's just a very expensive process, right? So how do we make sure that we attach ourselves into an ecosystem? And so we're putting that in place. I'm very, very pleased that we're getting amazing traction with some absolutely world-class billion dollar players. So very pleased about that.
Great to hear that. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Nat. Again, wanted to thank you once again for sort of, walking us through the flow of your pitch, people, process, and product, along customer discovery and customer validation. Just before we started, recording for this podcast, you mentioned this journey about being, a lot of perspiration and, a small part of inspiration. So definitely, wanted to sort of, mention that because that's something that certainly is something to keep in mind when you're building something from scratch, right? It's a lot of hard work, and it's not just the glamour of building something, but a lot of the hard work that goes behind it. And so definitely wanted to appreciate you again for taking the time to talk with us and sharing your experience and journey. I want to wish you and AccuKnox the very best, and Happy New Year in advance to you and your family. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Raj. Same to you and your family, and same to all of your viewers. Thank you. Have a wonderful 2022, which is just around the corner. Thank you.
Thank you.